I told my daughter-in-law, Tiffany, when she announced that 25 members of her family were coming to spend Christmas at my house. I'm going on vacation. You all can do the cooking and cleaning. I am not the maid. Her face went pale as if she had seen a ghost. But what she didn't know was that the real surprise was just beginning. My name is Margaret. I am 66 years old. And for the last 5 years, I have been treated like the servant in my own home. It all started when my son Kevin married that woman. From the very first day, Tiffany decided I was her personal employee. Margaret, get me some coffee. Margaret, clean this up. Margaret, cook for my guests. And I, like a fool, always obeyed. I thought it was how I could keep my family together. But I had reached my limit. That Tuesday in December, Tiffany swept into my kitchen as she always did. Without knocking. With that fake smile I despised. She was wearing a ridiculously expensive red dress, undoubtedly paid for with my son's money. Her heels clicked against my ceramic tile, like little hammers on my last nerve. Margaret, she said in that condescending tone she reserved for me, I have marvelous news. My entire family is coming to spend Christmas here. It's only 25 people. Only 25 people. As if that were a small number. As if I were a machine designed for cooking and cleaning. I saw the malice glinting in her eyes as she continued with her master plan. She settled into my kitchen chair, crossed her legs, and began to list them off as if reading a grocery list. I've already spoken with my sister Valeria, my cousin Evelyn, my brother-in-law Marco, my uncle Alejandro. Everyone is coming. My nieces and nephews will be here. My second cousins. Valeria's kids. It's going to be a perfect Christmas. She took a dramatic pause, expecting my usual panicked reaction. Of course. You'll handle everything. The food. The cleaning. Serving the tables. Her words hit me like slaps. I remembered all the times I had prepared dinners for her friends while she took the credit. All the times I had cleaned up after her parties while she slept until noon. All the times I had been made invisible in my own house. Well, need 3 turkeys at least, she continued, ignoring my silence. And that chocolate silk pie you make, too. Oh. And you'll have to decorate the entire house. I want it to look perfect for the Instagram photos. She waited for my typical bracket. Yes, Tiffany. But this time was different. This time, something inside me had shattered for good. I looked her directly in the eye, with a calm that surprised even me. Perfect, I repeated, watching her smile begin to falter. It will be a perfect Christmas for you all, because I won't be here. The silence that followed was deafening. Tiffany blinked several times, as if she hadn't heard correctly. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. The clicking of her heels stopped abruptly. What do you mean you won't be here? She finally managed to articulate, her voice trembling slightly. She sat up straighter in the chair, her perfect posture beginning to crumble. Exactly what you heard. I'm going on vacation. You all can cook, clean, and serve yourselves. I am not your employee. I watched the color drain completely from her face. Her hands began to shake. The coffee cup she was holding clinked against its saucer. For the first time in 5 years, Tiffany was speechless. But Margaret, she stammered. I already told everyone to come. It's all planned. You can't do this. Of course I can. It's my house. Those 4 words landed like a bomb in the kitchen. Tiffany's jaw dropped, her face shifting from shock to indignation. She shot up from the chair, her heels clicking again. But this time with desperation. This is ridiculous. Kevin is not going to allow this. Kevin can have whatever opinion he likes. But the decision has been made. For the first time, I was in control. But what she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that my decision wasn't spontaneous. I had been planning this for months, and I had my reasons. Reasons that would soon leave them all speechless. Tiffany's expression morphed from shock to fury in a matter of seconds. Her cheeks flushed, and her eyes narrowed like a snake about to strike. She stepped toward me, invading my personal space, as she always did when she wanted to intimidate me. "You know what, Margaret, I always knew you were selfish. But this is the absolute limit." Her voice became venomous, each word dripping with contempt. "My family is coming from far away. Some from out of the country. And you're going to ruin their Christmas over a whim. A whim. 5 years of mistreatment. Humiliation. And emotional abuse." And she called it a whim. I felt rage rise in my chest. But I remained serene. I had learned to control my emotions after so much time as her victim. "That's not my problem," I replied with a calm that unnerved her even more. "You should have consulted me before inviting 25 people to my house." "Our house," she shrieked, losing her composure completely. "Kevin is your son. This house will be ours one day." There it was. The truth that had always hovered in the air, but had never been spoken aloud. Tiffany didn't see me as family. She saw me as a temporary obstacle before she inherited everything I had built with years of hard work and sacrifice. "Interesting perspective," I murmured, watching her pupils dilate with panic as she realized what she had revealed. "Very interesting." At that moment, I heard keys in the front door. Kevin was home from work. Tiffany ran to him like a child tattling to her father, her heels clattering with desperate urgency. Kevin, your mother has gone insane. She says she won't help with Christmas. She says she's going on vacation and leaving us alone with my entire family." I heard their muffled voices from the living room. Tiffany spoke in a rush, her tone sharp and dramatic. Kevin murmured responses I couldn't make out. After a few minutes, their footsteps approached the kitchen. My son appeared in the doorway, his suit wrinkled after a day at the office, his face tired but annoyed. Behind him, Tiffany followed like a shadow, arms crossed and a triumphant expression on her face. She clearly expected him to put me in my place. "Mom," Kevin began in that patronizing tone he had adopted since his marriage. "Tiffany told me about your decision. Don't you think you're being a little dramatic?" Dramatique. My own son was calling me dramatic for refusing to be his wife's servant. I felt something cold and hard settle in my stomach. Something that had been growing for months finally crystallized in that moment. "No, Kevin. I'm not being dramatic. I'm being clear. But Mom, it's Christmas. It's a time for family. Tiffany already invited everyone. We can't cancel now." "I didn't say to cancel. I said I won't be here." Tiffany stepped forward, placing herself between Kevin and me like a human barrier. "See what I mean? She's become completely irrational. What will my family think? What am I going to tell them?" "Tell them the truth," I answered calmly. "That you assumed I would be your employee without consulting me, and that you were mistaken." Kevin sighed deeply, running a hand through his hair as he did when he was frustrated. "Mom, be reasonable. You know, Tiffany can't cook for 25 people by herself. And why not? I've cooked for her parties for years. It's time," she learned. "But I work," Tiffany protested. "I can't take days off to cook. My career is important." Her career, a part-time position at a boutique. She had probably gotten through Kevin's connections. But of course, then her career was more important than my time, my energy, my dignity. "Then here at Katia," I suggested with a sweet smile. "There are many excellent options in the city. Catering costs a fortune," Kevin exclaimed. "Why spend thousands of dollars when you can?" He stopped abruptly, realizing what he was about to say. "When I can do it for free." I finished for him. "Like always. Like the employee you think I am." The silence stretched between us, like a widening crack. Tiffany and Kevin exchanged nervous glances. I could see the wheels turning in their heads, trying to find a way to manipulate me into giving in. Look, Mom, Kevin said, finally, adopting a softer tone. I know you've been a bit sensitive lately. Maybe you're going through some hormonal changes. Hormonal changes? Seriously? He was reducing me to a hysterical menopausal woman. The fury I had been containing began to boil beneath the surface. But I managed to keep my voice steady. There is nothing hormonal about this. Kevin, this is about one very clear thing. Respect. And for 5 years, neither you nor your wife has shown me any. That's not true. Tiffany protested. We've always treated you well. You're part of the family. The part of the family that serves, cleans, and cooks while you two have fun. The part of the family that is never consulted, but is always expected to obey. Kevin came closer, placing a hand on my shoulder, as he used to do as a boy when he wanted something, but he was no longer the sweet child I had raised. He was a man who had chosen his wife over his mother in every conflict for the past 5 years. All right, Mom, I understand you're upset. But think about it. It's just 1 week after Christmas. Everything goes back to normal. Normal. In their normal where I was invisible except when they needed me. Where my feelings didn't matter, as long as their life was comfortable. Where my house had ceased to be my sanctuary and had become their personal hotel. No. Kevin. Things are not going back to normal because I'm leaving tomorrow. They both froze. Tiffany was the first to react, her voice rising an octave. Tomorrow. Tomorrow. I confirmed, enjoying the panic that began to gleam in their eyes. I already have everything arranged. What they didn't know was that I truly did have everything arranged. Just not in the way they thought. This is insane. Tiffany shrieked, her eyes wide as she paced my kitchen like a caged animal. You can't leave tomorrow. It's impossible. My family arrives in 3 days. Well, you should have thought of that before you took for granted that I would be your employee. I replied, maintaining my serene tone as I calmly washed my coffee cup. Every movement was calculated to show that her dramatics didn't faze me. Kevin just stood there, shifting nervously from one foot to the other, clearly torn between supporting his hysterical wife and trying to reason with me. His eyes darted between the two of us, as if he were watching a tense tennis match. Mom, please, he finally murmured. At least tell us where you're going. When will you be back? I'm going to visit my sister in Miami. I lied smoothly. And I'll be back after New Year's. The lie came so naturally. It surprised even me. But it was necessary. They couldn't know my real plans. Not yet. After New Year's. Tiffany practically choked on her own words. But what are we going to do? I already told everyone to come. My uncle Alejandro already bought his plane tickets from Miami. Valeria can-led her plans. Marco took time off work. Those are their problems. Not mine. I saw desperation begin to replace the rage on Tiffany's face. Her perfectly manicured hands trembled as she gripped the marble countertop, her knuckles white from the pressure. Margaret, her voice suddenly changed, becoming syrupy and manipulative. You know, I've always thought of you as a second mother. You're so important to me. To us. You can't just abandon us like this. There it was. The switch in tactics from fury to emotional manipulation. I had seen this play many times before. But it no longer worked on me. If you really considered me a mother, you wouldn't treat me like a servant. But I don't treat you like a servant. I just thought you enjoyed cooking for the family. I thought you liked to feel useful. Useful. That word pierced me like a dagger. For 5 years, I had believed that being useful was my way of keeping the peace, of securing a place in my son's life. But now I understood that being useful had only made me a shadow in my own home. You know what? Tiffany, you're right. I do like to feel useful. That's why I'm going to be useful to myself for the first time in years, Kevin intervened again. His frustration now evident in every line on his face. Mom? This isn't fair. You know, we don't have the money to hire a caterer for 25 people. The deposit on the new apartment wiped out our savings. A new apartment? This was the first I was hearing about a new apartment. My eyes narrowed as I processed this information. Since when were they planning to move? And why hadn't they told me? What new apartment? I asked. My voice laced with a dangerous curiosity. Tiffany and Kevin exchanged a guilty look. The kind of look you share when you've just revealed something that was supposed to be a secret. Well, Kevin began, looking down at his shoes. We were going to tell you after the holidays. We found an incredible place downtown. 3 bedrooms. Ocean view. A gym in the building. Sounds expensive, I observed, keeping my tone neutral, though my mind was racing. Well, yes. But it's worth the investment. And don't worry. We're not moving far. Only 30 minutes from here. 30 minutes. Close enough to keep using my house as their personal restaurant. But far enough to have their privacy. How convenient. And how do you plan to pay for it? I asked. Though I already had a suspicion about the answer. Tiffany's face suddenly lit up, as if she'd found the perfect solution to all our problems. That's why it's so important that we have a perfect Christmas. My uncle Alejandro is very generous when he's impressed. And my brother-in-law Marco has connections in real estate. If everything goes well, they could help us with Kevin's business. There it was. The real reason behind the grand Christmas celebration. It wasn't about family or tradition. It was about money. About impressing wealthy relatives to get financial favors. And I was the cornerstone of their manipulation scheme. I see, I murmured, letting the silence hang as they both waited for my response. So, you need your Christmas to be perfect to impress the rich family. Exactly, Tiffany exclaimed, relieved that I finally understood the gravity of the situation. I knew you'd get it. You're so smart. Margaret. You always know the right thing to do. The right thing. For 5 years. The right thing had been to sacrifice my comfort. My time. My dignity, to make their lives easier. But now, I had a completely different perspective on what was right. You're right, Tiffany. I know exactly what the right thing to do is. That's why my decision stands. I'm leaving tomorrow. The hope vanished from their faces like spilled water. Tiffany began to breathe rapidly. On the verge of a panic attack. You can't do this. You can't ruin our future over a tantrum. It's not a tantrum. It's a well-thought-out decision. But what will my family think when they arrive, and there's no one here to receive them? What will they think when they see there's no food prepared? They will think that their niece invited them without having the capacity to be a host. And they will be correct. Kevin stepped closer, his desperation now palpable. Mom, please. If you really need a vacation, we can postpone it. After New Year's, you can go wherever you want. For as long as you want. We'll pay for your trip. The hotel. Everything. They'd pay for my trip. With what money? I wondered if they had just said the apartment deposit left them with no savings. But it didn't matter. Their offer was 5 years too late. The offer is tempting, Kevin. But my decision is made. This is emotional blackmail. Tiffany burst out, her mask of sweetness finally falling away completely. You're using our situation to manipulate us. Emotional blackmail. The words hung in the air like an unwitting confession. Because if I was engaging in emotional blackmail by refusing to be their free employee, what had they been doing for 5 years? You know what emotional blackmail is. Tiffany, it's making me feel guilty every time I don't want to cook for your friends. It's telling me that a good mother-in-law always puts the family first when I refuse to clean up after your parties. It's assuming my plans don't matter because I'm retired and have nothing better to do. Every word was a bullet that hit its mark. I saw them both flinch slightly with each accusation, because they knew it was true. All of it was true. That's not the same thing, Tiffany stammered. But her voice had lost all its previous force. You're right. It's not the same. Because what you two have done is much worse. You have taken my generosity for granted for years. The kitchen fell into a tense silence. I could hear the ticking of the wall clock, the hum of the refrigerator, Tiffany's ragged breathing. But what I could hear most clearly was the sound of my own approaching freedom. Because tomorrow everything would change. And they had no idea just how much. That night, while Tiffany and Kevin were still in the living room arguing in desperate whispers, I locked myself in my room and pulled out my laptop. It was time to set the second phase of my plan in motion. A plan that had been brewing for months. Ever since I discovered something that changed my entire perspective on my dear daughter-in-law, 3 months earlier. While foolishly cleaning Kevin's home office, I had found a forgotten folder among his papers, filled with bank statements, printed emails, and legal documents. At first, I thought they were work papers. But something caught my eye. Tiffany's name appeared again and again in transactions I didn't understand. That night, after they went to sleep, I returned to the office and reviewed everything meticulously. What I found chilled me to the bone. Tiffany had been spending money. They didn't have a lot of money. Credit cards in Kevin's name that he knew nothing about. Personal loans, using the house as collateral. And compulsive shopping sprees at luxury stores that added up to over $50. 0 inches debt. But that wasn't all. I also found emails where Tiffany discussed with her friends how to manage Kevin so he wouldn't discover her spending. How to keep him distracted while she kept shopping. And most chilling of all, a message thread where she planned to convince him to sell the house, to invest in their future together. My house? The house I had lived in for 30 years. The house I had paid for with my work. My savings. My sacrifices. Tiffany wanted Kevin to sell it to pay off her compulsive shopping debts. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stayed awake until dawn, processing the betrayal, the manipulation, the deceit. But along with the devastation, something else began to grow. A cold, calculated determination to protect myself. The next day, I began my own silent investigation. I hired a private detective. A discreet man my lawyer had recommended years ago. I asked him to track all of Tiffany's financial activities. What we discovered was even worse than I had imagined. Not only was she a compulsive spender, but she had also been lying about her job. Her important career at the boutique was part-time. And she was barely making minimum wage. But she had been telling Kevin she earned 3 times that amount. Where did the extra money for her personal expenses come from? The secret credit cards. Of course. And there was more. Tiffany had been telling her relatives that we were much wealthier than we actually were. She had told them that Kevin had a thriving business, that I had a considerable fortune, that our house was worth twice its actual price. All lies to maintain her image as a successful, well-married woman. Now, as I looked at my laptop screen, in the quiet darkness of my room, I smiled for the first time in months, because I had taken steps they couldn't even imagine. First, I had moved all my savings to a new account at a different bank. An account Kevin knew nothing about and would never have access to. Then, I had consulted with my lawyer about how to protect the house's deed. It turned out there were very effective legal ways to ensure no one could force me to sell it. But my masterstroke had been to contact Tiffany's family directly. Not all of them. Just the ones who really mattered. Her uncle Alejandro, the successful businessman from Miami. Her brother-in-law Marco, the real estate agent who was supposedly going to help them. And her sister Valeria, who worked in finance and had an impeccable reputation. I had sent them very polite emails, introducing myself as Tiffany's concerned mother-in-law. I told them I was worried about the young couple's delicate financial situation and wanted to ask their advice on how to help. Of course, I had accidentally attached some of the most alarming bank statements I had found. The responses were immediate. Alejandra was furious at being deceived about Tiffany's real situation. Marco immediately canceled any plans for financial assistance. Valeria was so angry. She threatened to come personally to sort out her younger sister's life. But the best part was that none of them had said anything to Tiffany yet. They were waiting for the Christmas gathering to confront her in person. A gathering that would now be missing the host they expected, the food they were promised, and the festive atmosphere Tiffany had painted in her lies. My phone vibrated with a text message. It was from Alejandro. Mrs. Margaret? After reviewing the documents you sent, my family and I have decided to arrive a day earlier than planned. We want to speak with Tiffany about some important matters before the celebration. Would it be possible for you to receive us on the morning of the 23rd? The morning of the 23rd. Exactly when I would be packing my bags for my trip to Miami. What a perfect coincidence, I replied quickly. Of course. Alejandro. It will be a pleasure to have you. However, I must inform you that I will be leaving for a trip that same day. So Tiffany and Kevin will be your hosts. His response came in seconds. Perfect. That will be exactly what we need. I closed the laptop and lay back in bed, smiling in the dark. For 5 years, I had been the silent victim, the submissive mother-in-law, the free employee. But all that time, I had been observing, learning, understanding how my in-laws really worked. Tiffany thought she was so smart, so manipulative, so clever. But she had gravely underestimated the older woman who cleaned up her messes. She had assumed my age, and my apparent meekness meant I was helpless. Tomorrow morning, while she was still asleep, I would be packing my bags, not for Miami. As I had told them, my real destination was a luxury hotel, just an hour away, where I had booked a suite with an ocean view for the next 2 weeks. From there, I would have a front-row seat to the collapse of the little kingdom of lies Tiffany had built. I would watch her family discover her deceptions. I would watch Kevin finally open his eyes to the woman he had married. I would watch her whole perfectly manipulated world fall apart piece by piece. And best of all, I wouldn't have to lift a finger to make it happen. Tiffany had dug her own grave with years of lies and deceit. I had simply taken the shovel out of her hands and showed her family where to look. Outside, I could hear that the argument in the living room had finally ended. Footsteps on the stairs. Doors closing. The tense silence of a house full of unresolved conflicts. But I slept deeply that night. For the first time in 5 years, I slept with the smile of someone who knows that justice, even when it's late, always arrives. At 6:00 inches the morning, my alarm clock sang like the anthem of freedom. I got up with an energy I hadn't felt in years. I showered peacefully and began to pack my bags. Every garment I folded was another step toward my independence. Every item I stored away was a silent declaration that I was no longer anyone's employee. Tiffany and Kevin were still asleep. I could hear their deep breathing from the hallway as I carried my suitcases down the stairs. I had prepared a note, which I left on the kitchen table, next to the spare house keys. A brief but precise note. Have decided to leave early for my trip. The house is in your hands. Enjoy your perfect Christmas. Margaret. What the note didn't mention was that I had made a few additional preparations before leaving, like completely emptying the pantry and the refrigerator. After all, if they were going to host 25 people, they needed to learn to be responsible for buying food. I had also locked away all my good china, my elegant tablecloths, and my Christmas decorations in my bedroom. If they wanted to impress the rich family, they would have to get their own supplies. But my final touch had been to cancel the cleaning service that came twice a week. A service that I paid for, but for which Tiffany always took the credit for having a perfectly kept house. Starting today, she could experience what it really meant to keep a house clean on her own. The taxi arrived promptly at 7 inches the morning. As the driver loaded my bags, I took one last look at the house where I had lived for 3 decades. A house that had been my sanctuary, then my prison, and now would once again be my fortress. Because even though I was leaving temporarily, this was still my house. And I had every intention of reclaiming it completely. The hotel where I checked in was everything I had dreamed of during my years of forced domestic service, a spacious suite with an ocean view, 24-hour room service, and most importantly, absolute silence. No one shouting for me from the kitchen. No one expecting me to appear with fresh coffee. No one assuming my time had no value. My phone started ringing at 10:47 inches the morning. Kevin. Of course. Mom. Where are you? We found your note. But why did you leave early? His voice sounded confused. Still sleepy. He had probably just discovered the empty pantry and the fact that no one was there to make his weekend breakfast. Good morning. Kevin. I decided there was no point in prolonging the inevitable. You two have a lot to do to prepare. And I am very much looking forward to some rest. But, Mum, this is so sudden. Tiffany is. Well, she's pretty upset. Upset. What a diplomatic way to say she was having a full-blown panic attack at the realization that she would actually have to take charge of her own life. I'm sure she'll manage perfectly. After all, she's a very capable woman. There was a long pause. I could hear voices in the background. Tiffany speaking in a rapid, hysterical tone. Could you at least tell us where you are in case of an emergency? I am safe and in a good place. That's all you need to know. Mom. Please. I know you're angry, but this is extreme. Tiffany's family arrives in 2 days. And we don't know how. Kevin. I interrupted him firmly. You are 32 years old. Tiffany is 29. You are fully functional adults. I am certain you can solve your own problems without relying on a 6'6" woman. Another pause. This one longer. Fina. He finally sighed. But promise me you'll be okay. And when are you coming back? I'll be back when I'm ready. Enjoy your Christmas. I hung up before he could insist further. I immediately put my phone on silent mode. I knew the next few hours would be a constant bombardment of desperate calls and messages, but I had waited 5 years for this moment of peace. I wasn't going to let them ruin it. I ordered lobster thermidor from room service. Something I would never have cooked for myself, because it would have seemed too extravagant by the standards of austerity Tiffany had imposed in my own home. As I ate slowly, savoring every bite, my phone blinked constantly, with silenced notifications. The best part was yet to come, because tomorrow morning, exactly as I had calculated, Tiffany's family would begin to arrive. They would not find the perfect Christmas she had promised them. Instead, they would find the raw reality of who the woman who had been living on lies for years truly was. At 3:00 inches the afternoon, I finally checked my messages. There were 17 missed calls from Kevin, 31 from Tiffany, and an avalanche of texts, escalating from confusion to pleading to outrage. But the message I was really interested in had arrived from Alejandro at noon. Mrs. Margaret. My family and I will arrive tomorrow at 8:00 inches the morning, as agreed. We look forward to meeting you personally and having that important conversation with Tiffany. Thank you for your hospitality. Hospitality. If only he knew that by 8:00 tomorrow, the only hospitality they would find would be Tiffany trying to explain why the house was empty, why there was no food, and why the generous mother-in-law she had boasted so much about had mysteriously disappeared. I replied to Alejandro, I regret to inform you that I had to move up my trip due to unexpected family commitments. Tiffany and Kevin will be delighted to host you. I'm sure you will have much to talk about. His response was immediate. I understand perfectly. In fact, this might be for the best. Some conversations are better in private. Private. Exactly what they needed. A private conversation between a woman who had been lying for years and a family that finally knew the truth about her financial deceptions. That afternoon, as I enjoyed a massage at the hotel spa, I allowed myself to imagine the scene that would unfold tomorrow morning. Tiffany and Kevin waking up in a panic, making a last-minute run to the grocery store, desperately trying to create the illusion of hospitality they had promised. And then, at 8:00 sharp, the sound of the doorbell announcing the arrival of the family who had come to collect on past due accounts. I couldn't help but smile as the masseuse worked on the knots of tension that had been in my shoulders for 5 years. Knots that were finally beginning to unravel. Onebiwan. Just like Tiffany's lies. The morning of the 23rd dawned with a clear sky, and my phone exploded with calls. I woke to the first call from Kevin at 6:30 inches the morning. I didn't answer, while I leisurely ate eggs Benedict with smoked salmon on my suite's terrace. I decided to check the voicemails. The first was from Kevin. "Mom, please pick up. Tiffany is hysterical. We don't know what to make for breakfast for 25 people. The grocery store doesn't open until 8, and the family arrives at exactly that time. We need help urgently. Please. Please call us." The second was from Tiffany, her voice completely broken. "Margaret, I know you're mad at me. And I get why. But please don't make me look bad in front of my family. They traveled from so far away. My uncle Alejandro came from Miami. Valeria can led important plans. I don't know how to cook for this many people. I don't even know where to start. I promise we'll talk later and fix everything. But right now, I desperately need your help." The third message was even better. Tiffany again. Now, sobbing. "Margaret, I just checked the pantry and the refrigerator. Everything is empty. Why is there nothing? How am I supposed to feed my family? Where is the good china? Where are the Christmas tablecloths, please? At least just tell me where you put everything. Just that. Please." Ah. Yes. The dawning realization that running a household requires planning, effort, and actual money. The tardy understanding that food doesn't magically appear in refrigerators, that tables don't set themselves, that decorations don't install themselves by magic. But the message I was truly waiting for arrived at 7:15 inches the morning. It was from a voice I didn't recognize, but it spoke with authority. "Mrs. Margaret, this is Alejandro, Tiffany's uncle. We arrived at the airport early and decided to come straight to your house. We expect to be there in 15 minutes. I'm very much looking forward to meeting you and having that conversation we've been planning." Perfect. They would arrive at the peak of Tiffany and Kevin's panic. At Optoazit. My phone rang. This time, I answered. "Mom?" Kevin's voice was trembling, on the verge of a nervous breakdown. "Can you talk?" "Good morning." Kevin. "Of course. I can talk. How is your morning going?" "Mom, please don't do this. Tiffany's family just arrived, and we have nothing to offer them. Literally nothing. Tiffany is crying in the bathroom and I don't know what to do." "Have you explained the situation to them?" "What situation? How do I explain that my mother decided to go on vacation right when we needed her most? When they needed me most, not when I needed respect or understanding, or a simple thank you for 5 years of service. Only when they needed me." "Tell them the truth. Kevin, that for 5 years you took it for granted that I would be your unpaid domestic servant, and that I finally decided I deserved a vacation." There was a pause. I could hear voices in the background. A mix of panic and confusion. Someone was speaking sternly. Probably Alejandro asking where the main hostess was. "At least, can you tell us where you always bought the food? What you used to make for special occasions? Anything to help?" Kevin. "I didn't always buy anything. I planned for weeks in advance. I researched recipes, made detailed lists, compared prices, and dedicated entire days to preparation. It wasn't magic. It was work. A lot of work. The silence on the other end told me he was finally beginning to understand the magnitude of what he had ignored for years. Look, he continued, his voice smaller. I know we've been inconsiderate. But right now, I need practical solutions. What do I do with 25 hungry people in my living room? Order takeout. Call restaurants. Go to the supermarket. Do what all responsible adults do when they have guests. But it's the holidays. Everything is closed or swamped. The restaurants have no availability. Then maybe you should have thought of that before you invited 25 people without consulting the person you expected to do all the work. I heard a new voice in the background. A serious tone. Alejandra was clearly demanding an explanation. Mom, Tiffany's uncle wants to talk to you. He says he needs to understand what's going on. I would love to talk to him. But I'm on vacation. Tell him Tiffany can explain everything perfectly. After all, she's the one who organized this gathering. Please. Mom? Just 5 minutes. He's very confused and a little upset. I think he can help us solve this. Help us again. It was all about helping them. It was never about what I needed. What I deserved. Or how they had made me feel for years. Kevin, listen to me very carefully. For 5 years, every time you needed something, I was there. Every time Tiffany wanted to impress someone, I did the work. Every time you had problems, I was the solution. Today, for the first time in half a decade, you have to solve your own problems. And that is not my responsibility, but it's my family, he finally shouted. Losing his composure, I heard Alejandro's clear voice in the background. Young man, I need to understand what kind of family gathering you organize. Where's the woman of the house? Where's the grandmother who invited them? Alejandro had clearly understood from his conversations with Tiffany that I was the matriarch who organized these events. The main hostess. The person responsible for the family's hospitality. And now there was no one. Just 2 confused adults, finally facing the consequences of their own choices. Mom, please. At least talk to him. Explain that there's been a misunderstanding. There is no misunderstanding. Kevin, there is a reality that you refuse to see for years. And that reality is that without mutual respect, there is no functional family. I hung up. This time, I turned the phone off completely. It was time for the next phase. I went down to the hotel's business center. It was time to deploy the most delicious part of my plan. I sat at a computer and opened my email. I had several new messages from Tiffany's family. The first was from Valeria, the financially responsible sister. Dear Margaret, we've just arrived at your house, and the situation is quite confusing. Tiffany told us you left for an emergency. But we don't understand why the house seems uninhabited. There is no food. No Christmas preparations. And frankly, Tiffany's attitude is very strange. Could we speak by phone? The second message was from Alejandro, his tone considerably more serious. Mrs. Margaret, I respect that you had to travel for an emergency. But I need to understand what is happening in this house. Tiffany cannot coherently explain why the food she promised is not here. Why there are no Christmas decorations. Or even why she did not know you would be gone. This does not align at all with the family picture she painted for us. Please contact me urgently. Perfect. It was exactly the opening I had been waiting for. I replied to both emails with a carefully constructed message. Dear Alejandro and Valeria, I deeply apologize for the confusion. I was forced to move up my trip due to circumstances I would rather not discuss over email. However, I believe it is important for you to understand Tiffany and Kevin's true situation before continuing with any Christmas plans. The documents I previously sent you reflect only part of the financial reality. If you truly wish to help Tiffany, I suggest you have a very frank conversation with her about her spending habits and her unrealistic expectations regarding family support. Sincerely, Margaret. I sent the message and waited. I didn't have to wait long. 20 minutes later, my hotel room phone rang. It was the front desk. Mom, you have a long-distance call. Mr. Alejandro says it's urgent. Put him through. Please. Alejandro's voice was tense but controlled. Mrs. Margaret. Thank you for taking my call. I need to ask you some direct questions about my niece. Of course. Alejandro. I'm all ears. First, is it true that Tiffany has been asking you to cook and clean for all her family gatherings? That is correct. For the last 5 years, every time you have visited or she has had guests, I have handled all the preparations. And when she told us about the elaborate dinners and perfect events, was she organizing them, or were you? I planned everything from scratch. Tiffany took the credit. There was a long pause. I could hear voices in the background. Clearly Alejandro arguing with someone. Second question. The financial statements you sent us. Are they real? Completely real. I obtained them directly from my son's personal files. And Tiffany knows you discovered her debts. Not until today. She had no idea that I knew about her secret spending or her lies about her income. I see. His voice had turned to ice. One more question. Why did you decide to leave at this exact moment? Because I grew tired of being treated like a domestic servant in my own house. Tiffany assumed I would cook for 25 people without even asking if I was available or willing. The silence that followed was long and tense. Finally, Alejandro spoke. His voice dripping with disappointment and contained anger. Mrs. Margaret. My family owes you an apology. Tiffany has been lying to us for years. She painted a picture of you as a prosperous family, where she was the perfect organizer. She asked us for financial help to expand Kevin's business, when apparently the money was to pay off her compulsive shopping debts. I'm afraid so. And we, like fools, were ready to help because we believed she had proven herself to be responsible and successful. When in reality, you have been the one keeping everything running while she took the credit. Well, now we know. And let me tell you, my family does not tolerate this kind of deceit. Tiffany is going to have some very serious explaining to do. Alejandro, if I may suggest something, please. I think it would be beneficial for Tiffany to face the natural consequences of her decisions. She has lived in a bubble of privilege where others solved her problems. Perhaps it's time for her to learn to be truly independent. I completely agree. In fact, I have some news for her that is going to change her perspective drastically. The supposed financial support she was expecting from the family for her husband's business. Well, that was entirely dependent on her demonstrating fiscal responsibility and transparency. After seeing these documents and the current situation, I can assure you, there will be no support. My smile widened. I understand, but there's more. My brother-in-law, Marco, who was going to help them with real estate connections, is also very upset. Apparently, Tiffany had asked him to evaluate some properties for investment, including the house where you live. Did you know about this? This was new. I hadn't known Tiffany had gone so far as to ask Marco to evaluate my house for a sale. No, I did not know that. Well, Marco is furious. He invested time and resources based on false information. He feels completely deceived. Which brings me to my main point. My family has decided that this perfect Christmas is going to become a family intervention. Tiffany will have to explain every lie, every deception, every manipulation. A family intervention. This was even better than I had planned. Not only would Tiffany have to face the logistical disaster of her party, but she would also have to account for years of deceit before her entire family. And what about the other relatives? They are all aware of the situation now. For dinner tonight, the whole family will know the truth about Tiffany. And does she know? Not yet, but she's about to. I could hear voices rising in the background. Things were clearly escalating at my house. Mrs. Margaret, I have to go deal with this situation. But I want you to know that my family respects you enormously for enduring this for so long and for having the dignity to walk away. Thank you, Alejandro. That means a great deal to me. One more thing. When you are ready to return, we hope to meet you properly. The real Margaret. Not the employee Tiffany pretended you were. It will be a pleasure. I hung up and leaned back in my chair, feeling a deep, warm satisfaction at my house. Tiffany's world of lies was crumbling piece by piece, exactly as I had planned. That evening, I hired a discreet car service to take me for a drive through my neighborhood, just to observe from a safe distance. The scene I found surpassed my wildest expectations. There were several rental cars parked haphazardly, and multiple grocery bags were scattered on the front porch, clearly abandoned mid-crisis. It was like watching a telenovela in real time, only 1,000 times more satisfying. My phone vibrated. It was a text from Valeria. Mrs. Margaret. Could you call me? I need to ask about additional documents. I called immediately. Mrs. Margaret, she said, her voice tense. I'm reviewing my sister's financial situation, and it's worse than we thought. I just discovered she has been using Kevin's name and credit information to open accounts he doesn't know about. This could be considered identity fraud. This was new information. Does Kevin know? We just told him an hour ago. He's in shock. He keeps saying it must be a misunderstanding. Valeria, I have to ask something delicate. Did you know Tiffany told our family that you were considering making her the beneficiary of your will? The question hit me like a lightning bolt. What? Yes. She told us you were planning to leave her the house and a significant part of your savings. She used that as collateral for some of the loans she took out from family. The betrayal was even deeper than I had imagined. Valeria, I can assure you that is completely false. My will does not include Tiffany as a beneficiary of anything. I imagine so. But she used that story to borrow over $20,000 from some of our cousins in the States. Arshamayuan. 0 inches debt that I was supposedly going to cover with my death. It was so twisted, so maliciously calculated. How is Tiffany reacting to all this? I asked. There was a long pause. She's in complete denial. She keeps insisting it's all a misunderstanding, that you're being vengeful because you felt left out of the Christmas plans. Of course. Even when confronted with irrefutable evidence, Tiffany was still trying to play the victim. And the Christmas celebration, Valeria laughed bitterly. What Christmas? Tiffany ordered pizza for 25 people because she didn't know how to cook anything else. We're eating off paper towels because she can't find the good plates. Instead of celebrating, we're having the most intense family showdown of our lives. Pizza for 25. The irony was delicious. What do you plan to do now? I asked. Some of us are leaving tomorrow. This isn't the family reunion we expected. But a few of us are staying to make sure she understands the consequences of her actions. All family loans are being called in immediately. The financial support for Kevin's business is gone. And we will be informing other family members to protect them from future manipulations. It was poetic justice. And Kevin, that's the saddest part. I think he truly knew nothing about her lies. He's devastated. My poor son. But I also knew this was the only way he would ever open his eyes. Valeria, there's one more thing you should know. When I return home, and I will return soon, I will be making some significant changes. Tiffany will no longer have free access to my house. There will be new rules, new boundaries, and new consequences for disrespect. That sounds perfect. It's time she learned to live in the real world. I hung up and asked the driver to take me back to the hotel. Tomorrow would be my triumphant return. The morning of December 24th dawned cold but bright. I packed my bags calmly and prepared for the final confrontation. Before leaving the hotel, I called my lawyer. Robert, I'm Margaret. Are all the documents we discussed ready? Perfectly ready. Margaret. The changes to the will are notarized. The amendment to the house deed is registered, and the new residency agreements are ready for your signature. Perfect. I'll see you in an hour at my house. Are you sure you want to do this on Christmas Eve? Robert. There is no more perfect time. It's time my family learned the true meaning of gratitude. The taxi dropped me off at 10:00 the morning. I opened the door with my key, and the house fell silent. Margaret. Kevin's voice was incredulous, almost hopeful. Yes. I'm back. He appeared first with deep dark circles under his eyes. Behind him came Tiffany. A version I had never seen before. No makeup. Wrinkled clothes. Eyes swollen from crying. Then came the rest of her family. Alejandro. Stern and imposing. Valeria. Holding a folder of documents. Marco and Evelyn. Their faces etched with disappointment. Mrs. Margaret. Alejandro said, extending a hand respectfully. It is an honor to finally meet you. We are deeply sorry to have met under these circumstances. The honor is mine. Alejandro. And don't worry. Sometimes, the truth needs to come out dramatically. Just then, the doorbell rang. It was Robert. My lawyer. Robert. Thank you for coming. I believe we're all ready for the conversation we've been postponing for years. Robert entered, his presence immediately adding a legal weight to the room. Good morning, he said professionally. I am Robert Miller, Mrs. Margaret's attorney. I understand there are some family and financial matters that require clarification. Tiffany grew even paler. Why is there a lawyer here? Because after 5 years of emotional abuse, financial manipulation, and a total lack of respect, I have decided I need legal protection. I replied with icy calm. Legal protection from what Kevin asked. Genuinely confused. From your wife's attempts to use my future death as collateral for loans. From her plans to convince you to sell my house to pay off her compulsive shopping debts. From her unauthorized use of your credit information. Need I continue? The silence was absolute. Tiffany slumped onto the sofa. Finally, understanding her world of lies had completely collapsed. Robert, I said. Shall we proceed? Very well. First, the testament changes. Mrs. Margaret has amended her will to ensure that the ownership of this house can never be sold or mortgaged without her explicit consent. Even after her death, the house will be transferred into a family trust that protects Kevin's interests, but prohibits any financial speculation. Tiffany began to cry silently. Kevin looked shocked, but also, for the first time, genuinely ashamed. Second, Robert continued. The new terms of residency. Tiffany no longer has unrestricted access rights to this property. Any visit must be coordinated in advance and approved by Mrs. Prosson. Margaret, what does that mean exactly? Kevin asked, his voice trembling. It means your wife can no longer walk into my house whenever she pleases. I give orders about my food and my time. Or assume I will be her domestic servant. Mom, I never knew that you never knew. In 5 years. You never noticed that every time you had guests, I did all the work while she took the credit. You never wondered why your wife never cooked or cleaned, but always talked about what a perfect hostess she was. Kevin bowed his head, finally confronting years of willful blindness. Alejandro approached Tiffany, his voice heavy with paternal disappointment. Tiffany, our family gave you opportunities, trust, and support based on lies. You made us unwitting accomplices in your disrespect toward a woman who deserved our admiration, not our contempt. Uncle, you never wanted what? To lie about your income, to commit identity fraud, to promise inheritances that weren't yours to give, to treat your mother-in-law like a servant. Tiffany had no answer. There is one more thing, I continued, looking directly at Tiffany. You will pay back every penny you borrowed using lies about my supposed inheritance. You will personally apologize to every family member you deceived. And you will learn to live within your actual means. Not in the fantasy you built at my expense. And if she doesn't, Valeria asked, then she will face the appropriate legal consequences for identity fraud and fraudulent obtainment of credit. Robert finished, closing his briefcase. I addressed the entire family gathered in my living room. For 5 years. I sacrificed my dignity because I thought I was keeping the family together. But I learned something important. A family built on disrespect and manipulation is not a family at all. It is a toxic structure that hurts everyone involved. I looked specifically at Kevin. Son, I love you. But you have to decide what kind of man you want to be. One who allows his wife to abuse his mother, or one who defends respect and honesty in his family. Finally, I looked at Tiffany. And you have to decide if you want to be a responsible adult who faces the consequences of her actions, or continue to be a manipulative child who expects others to solve the problems she creates. The clock struck noon on Christmas Eve. Now, I said with a smile I had been saving for months. Those who wish to stay for a Christmas based on honesty, respect, and real gratitude are welcome. Those who prefer to continue living in fantasies and manipulations may leave. For the first time in 5 years, I was in total control of my house, my life, and my future, and I had never felt a freedom so complete.